to tell me about the moment when you realized you had a global business on your hands. Or
Since COVID, everything is gone kind of virtual. And we realized that actually we can do that in London as well as in, I don't know, Washington, D.C., as well as in Cape Town. It makes no difference where you are because the solutions and the people who are doing it and working are the same.
And presumably governments around the world, I mean, you know this better than I do. So, presumably governments around the world are recognizing that disabled people are ubiquitous and that they're a critical part of the labor market and companies need people. I mean, you might have recruited somebody and they then become disabled, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, my reading of the situation is that there's a growing understanding that we need to keep disabled people in the labor market. I mean, is that fair?
People really have a bias in themselves. They always want to do things the way they've always done, especially on the government levels. They don't really like change. So when it comes to someone with disability, the first thing people always think of is somebody who's in a wheelchair or someone who's blind with a white stick. And they relate to those people by saying, well, there's no way they can do my job. So they can't be as good as me. So hence, why would I want to spend money on trying to get them into employment because they can't really fulfill a job that we want? Now, that's obviously maybe exaggerating it, but I'm afraid that's how I feel. Most governments are not fully convinced that disabled people could be equal.
What you're trying to do is not only to supply technology to help people, but also to change the culture and people's understandings of the barriers to people with disability. I mean, in lots of different parts of the world, because you work all over the planet, really. I mean, how do you overcome those challenges? Because they're really difficult things to deal with.
Well, again, something that we had a significant shift during post-COVID is the number of people who are facing challenges has gone up significantly. Yeah. So I heard recently that in Germany, people take average 20 days sick leave. In Sweden, a really serious problem they are just facing, and people facing, again, issues of coming to work. And so whilst a lot of the organizations have been talking about hiring more disabled people, as in there's 1.6 billion disabled people out of work, we need to give them a future, give them a job, and make sure we hire them. I keep kind of saying to these employers, worry about those you already have developed disabilities. Stop losing them. Presumably, they used to be good at doing something. Now they can't because of their condition. We can easily fix those. We can easily remove those barriers they're facing because of their condition. So what the catchphrase nowadays is that prevention is the new cure.
Yeah.
If you stop these people falling out of employment, and we can do that with tools today, existing tools today, existing training today, so you can get a lot more out of the people who you have no choice but to keep employing. It's not like, don't let them in, we can't handle them. You already have them. And if you don't, you either have productivity loss, which is significant. You can have absenteeism, which is quite impactful. You can actually have people leave you early or retire early, or worse still, they can sue you for discrimination, and there are lots of laws. So it's much easier to convince people, don't waste your money or your time. Let's fix the problem at source. And then you'll find that these people contribute as much as they used to. When you put disability in a kind of a diversity and inclusion box, you're talking about normally fringe of society, people who need different treatment to get the same results. That's fine if the numbers are 1 or 2%. That's how they used to be perceived. Only a small, tiny population have disabilities because our disclosure rate is only about 2%. If you work out, even the UK government's always publishing data. In UK, some public sector talking about 28% of the workers declared disabilities. You also hear lots of things about people talking about mental health as being quite seriously on the rise, like 30-35% of the workforce. That's an underestimate, but let's say they too. Then you bring things with their old age, people aging, and they won't admit they have condition, hearing loss, vision loss, and all that. Once you add these together, I think they come to a sizable minority, or even probably a bit of a majority.
Yeah.
So you can no longer treat that cohort as a minority diversity and inclusion agenda. That's where you should actually come out of, step back and say, okay, what do we need to do? How do we rearrange the workplace so that we get the most out of these people? She said, what's missing is a chief productivity officer.
Yeah.
Someone who says, what do I need to do to get everyone to be at their best? And if you get that kind of position in an organization, they wouldn't care about the reason why someone is not productive. They want to find a way of making them productive. And that way you can get rid of the disability or any other discrimination because you're getting the result you want. And that's something that companies are starting to. We've seen some companies advertise chief productivity officer.
That is, how do you get the best out of your teams inside Microlink? How do you ensure that they're as productive as possible? Because it's a small team, but it's a tough gig working globally, isn't it? I mean, give us a sense of how you manage that situation in your own context.
We know what the tools are that could help to fix the problem. And we also know where to find those tools. We also know we can train people to do what we can do in UK. So to me, it's not whether can I have the same team assembled in Brazil to do what we do in UK. Well, it is a particular skill set. Yeah, we can train them. But what the biggest challenge we are currently having is inconsistent demand. So there's a company that says, I need to do this in India. And another one says, I need to do this in Italy. And someone says, I want to go back and do it in Australia. It's very hard to get them to kind of work together. Say, look, there is no supply chain in the countries you're talking about. There is no established practice. There's certainly no culture. In order to build all that, you need volume, demand. And in order to do that, you all need to get together.
So just tell me about, I mean, that idea about educating clients, I mean, you hear about that quite a lot. I mean, how did you approach, in a practical sense, I mean, how did you approach that? Because you're in a lot of different jurisdictions. Do you do it the same way everywhere, or is it different in different countries? I mean,
that way is different in different countries. And it's led by the employers, by the way. We can't tell them what to do. We will help them to find the kind of solutions that works for them. So, we will support them with training, coaching for organization, awareness raising, and all that, as well as providing the kind of technologies that exist in that locality and they can actually embed in their operation. So we're not really telling people what to do. We're helping them to do what they want to do. The disability is only a very small part of when we need to get something fixed in those organizations. It's a lot to do with IT, security, regulations, with governance, everything else on top of making the adjustment. So hence, as I said, it's not for the faint-hearted. You need to be very patient. You need to really understand the reasons why they can't do certain things and work with them to do the things they want to do and make sure that they can do it well.
Does the productivity argument, doing this is about enabling your people to be more productive rather than overcoming disability issues? I mean, does that argument play well everywhere, or do you have to, is it more nuanced than that?
If you go back to what I said, it depends who you're talking to. So if their remit is to diversity and inclusion, I think they just want to make sure they're doing the right thing, giving equity, but they don't really have that greater insight about or oversight of why we're doing this. They just want to fix a problem. If you talk to the right people at the right level of organization, yes, they do.
And if you were to go into a new country, somewhere that you perhaps not worked in the past, I know you've worked in an awful lot of places, but let's say you were to go to a new country and you'd not worked in the past, would you approach it do you approach that market entry process, if you like, the same way for every country? I mean, how do you manage that?
We have to be very creative what's possible.
Yeah.
So we have to create the ecosystem. It doesn't exist. And so that it doesn't exist because there's no demand. So suddenly the demand comes, you have to go and create the ecosystem. that can only work if that demand comes through. It's a chicken and egg situation.
Yeah.
So we're working, we expect, we manage their expectation.
And one of the things that's also interesting, I mean, you work with clients, you also work with suppliers, but you're also, I mean, one of the conversations we've talked about this in the past, you're also actually developing the technologies that are supplied to people. I mean, tell us about that. Because I know you do a lot around developing new products, new techniques, new technologies to help people with a whole range of different disabilities. I mean, how does that bit work? Because you're generating the products that the
Yeah.
suppliers can supply to the clients as well. So you're working
Well,
across the
it is very
ecosystem.
true. Well, we actually, again, I keep referring, my mind, my brain is like an engineer's brain. Uh, I don't have to invent tools to fix a problem. I can sometimes repurpose the tools made for something else. Because I have such a helicopter view of the problem, the very holistic nature of the problem and the solutions, I can not only just find products that do something else and I'll say, hey, this could actually solve this problem. I also can have my own team develop some of those tools that don't exist. And sometimes we help the clients to think of innovative ways of actually fixing the problems. It's very much like what is the quickest solution to a large scale problem. And it's a combination. So yes, we are working on a very, I would say, cutting edge research on autism, mental health in autistic people. And this is a pan-European project funded, and we are leading provider of AI and application development. We're using with lots of clinicians. So essentially what we're looking at monitoring the various the kind of factors could influence mental health of a young adolescent autistic person. And that could be nutrition, could be genetics, could be environment, could be all sorts of. What we are doing is actually getting all this information, collecting all this information, and constantly getting that on a daily, weekly, and monthly, and then put that to a machine learning to see whether we can find any correlation or causality of these. That's one very as I said, it's an extremely exciting project because once you identify those factors, you'll find that it's also the same factors affecting the rest of the population, except it's much more exaggerated within those cohorts. So we can, out of that, we could come up with some very exciting new technologies and new interventions for people who have mental health, ADHD, you name it.
How do you, in terms of deciding where to put your time and energy? I mean, I talk to CEOs all the time, and one of the biggest challenges is knowing where to spend limited resources. I mean, tell me about how you approach that, given that you're across that ecosystem, but you're also doing that in lots of different jurisdictions.
I love doing what I do.
Yeah.
And
That
I
comes
could never
across.
resist finding a solution. And secondly, because I know it makes such a big difference, the time and the place is not really that relevant to me. I spend as much time as it takes. And also knowing what I know about the problem itself, I'm very much more high level of seeing where those problems actually begin and where they actually become a real serious challenge and where people have such an amazing life once you fix those, remove those barriers. So I think to me is constantly going back, revisiting where this problem began, not where it is today. Tools. I helped around 1,000 schools in 2 years. And the one school we helped, this is about helping them with, it's called both emotional and physical well-being, as well as behavior for children, how to nuance the conversation and how to deal with those challenges that children face, not in a confrontational way. So one school academy, in 1 year, they dropped from 39 exclusion down to 0. 90% of people who end up in prison have been excluded from school education at one stage in their life.
Are you going to do something similar in other jurisdictions, the US, India, Brazil, etc.? I mean, is that
Well,
the plan for those
absolutely.
countries?
Well, there are barriers, different sorts of barriers, but barriers are barriers nevertheless. The barrier is communication. children who can't communicate effectively, whether it's seeing, hearing, writing, reading, or whatever.
Yeah.
If you remove those barriers, then they should perform like every other child. Okay, so that comes to this element of what are the biggest barriers people face, and how quickly and how easily and cheaply can you fix it. Our job is only to do what we can. It's not our job to fix the world's problem. And that's the way I look at myself. So now I can spend a bit of money, train teachers to look after the nutrition of the learners. That's not too expensive. Would I solve the world's problem? No, not at all. I'm not planning to. But even if it changes one person's life, that's enough.
Not only have you got to run a business in the UK, and it's quite a big business, you employ a lot of people, you've got a business in the US, in India, etc., etc. I mean, how do you, in terms of your effectiveness, I mean, how do you manage yourself in that context? How do you stay on top of everything? I mean, how does that work?
Well, I can actually see who's good at and then give them the job to do. So I don't get involved with day-to-day of how to run the business in India, but high level, I give them a steer of where we need to be, how we need to do it, know the players as well, because I've worked with people like you in the past, with the disability organizations, with global NGOs. For me, I know what the solutions look like and where to find it, but then I get good people say, okay, that's what you need to do, and they go and do it. So it is much easier than you make it out to be. It's like, as I said, that the orchestra conductor is only moving that, waving the hands, but people doing all the job. All they do is just sitting around, just conducting.
Yeah. If you were to go back to the beginning, knowing what you know, because you've been doing this for 30 odd years, what one piece of advice would you give yourself if you were starting again, knowing what you know now?
The problems we have, it's not like a new creation. The problems are just going one form to another. So to me, in 30 years, I've learned that human behavior is much easier to change if you do that by really showing them what good looks like, and then there is no reason, there's no excuse they could not do it. And if they don't do it, it means they don't plan to do it ever. So I don't waste my time on people who still deny Earth is not flat. So if they say, I want to do something, and I can convince them they're not doing it because they don't want to, then at least I'll tell them, don't talk. Don't say things which are not helpful by saying, I'm doing something if you're not. Now I know that how to prevent the company being dependent on one particular revenue stream. I've got so many ideas that need developing, including things like emerging, hypes, like people have, there's a frenzy about AI, how AI is going to change the world. To me, I have learned in 30 years of working, technology does not make things easier. It seems that it does. It makes life harder. That means it creates new industries actually trying to simplify the complications. So AI is going to create more work.
Nasser, thank you for
You're
sharing that story. I mean, it's great to hear, and long may it continue.
Oh, thank you, Paul. And it's always lovely to have you on the side and cheering for me. And you've always been very encouraging. Thank you again for your kind words.
See you soon, Nasser. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you.